I'm Aly Farooqui. I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Financial Services with IBM Cloud. I'm very pleased to have John Carlson here with me, who is the Senior Vice President for Cybersecurity with the American Bankers Association. John, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of new regulation come out, a lot of new guidelines, right? Not just from the regulators, but also from industry forums, right? Like such as the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council. That has been focused on cloud adoption, AI, right, and now emergingly more towards quantum, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that is happening. So if you can maybe share with our audience, right, what should financial institutions and banks should take away from some of the recent guidelines that have come out, because they can sometimes be overwhelming?
Yeah, I think the US government has been focusing on this on two different fronts. One, looking at some of the risk issues, particularly around cybersecurity, with a number of cyber threats that are coming through third-party providers, which is drawing attention to the need for institutions to have robust third-party risk management programs and incident response plans. We've seen a lot of requirements around things, specifically around incident response and notification, whether it's to regulators or to the general public or to victims of breaches and things of that nature. And then second is around innovation and how can financial institutions modernize and leverage cloud computing, artificial intelligence, other forms of innovation that can make them more resilient in the future, make them more competitive. So towards that end, you've seen a lot of guidance that's come out around third-party risk management. You've seen a lot of focus on cloud computing, both in terms of identifying what are the significant benefits of cloud services to financial institutions, but also what are the gaps that need to be filled in order to make it easier, make it more compliant with existing federal regulatory requirements around security and resiliency. And that's been the focus of some deep work that US Treasury Department has been conducting in partnership with the private sector, which has really been phenomenal to have that kind of public-private level collaboration and the ability to dive deeper into some of these gaps that have been identified, particularly as it relates to the desire to want to use more cloud services.
And John, we are obviously seeing organizations in all sectors, right, not just financial services, are adopting a hybrid multi-cloud approach, right? And in that ecosystem, you've got fintechs, right? You've got ISVs, SaaS providers that are essentially part of that overall architecture. And getting essentially focused on third and fourth party risk management and the controls that extend into those partners that you are collaborating with in today's modern architecture is very, very important, right? So I think some of the guidelines around third and fourth party risk is very spot on, but I think the implementation of that is still a challenge, right? Is that what you hear from your members at American Bankers Association?
Absolutely, and you've seen a lot of the enforcement action that the federal banking agencies have been taking is really about banks that don't have sufficient oversight of their fintech partnerships or oversight of their critical third-party providers. So you're seeing a kind of a focus on the examination side for that. You've seen the release of the joint interagency guidance that came out about a year ago, which is the good news from that is it's consolidated guidance amongst the three federal banking agencies, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. But you're still seeing some lingering issues with the implementation and how institutions are doing that. From the challenges that the institutions face are some of the things that I mentioned earlier around adequacy of information, visibility into, say, the interdependencies of different services, different companies that are relying upon, say, the same cloud service provider, and incident response. So how do you deal with an incident where it could be cascading? You could have an operational failure, for example, at a cloud service provider, and little did you know that your fintech provider, your other critical provider, was also using that cloud service provider. So how do you know that in advance? How do you architect in a way to mitigate those types of risks? I think that's the next level of the challenge that both financial institutions face, and it's a real opportunity for the cloud service providers to work with their customers to make that more visible and to have clearer, more well understood procedures around things like incident response.
So John, maybe talking about Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council, right? Very impressed by what the US Treasury did with the cloud report last year, right? And then the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council embarking on this journey on addressing some of the key findings and observations that were in those reports. American Banker Association has been pretty vital to that initiative. Can you maybe tell a little bit more about what are the initiatives and how are they progressing?
Yeah, so just to level set, so the Sector Coordinating Council was established about 22 years ago. It was in direct response to the 9/11 attacks, in which the public and private sector endeavored to collaborate more intensely and share and collaborate and work towards making the sector more resilient. Over the life of the organization, which I've actually had the pleasure of being involved in the Sector Coordinating Council, it goes by its acronym, the PHYSIC, during its entire life. And it's evolved over time to be very focused on cyber, be very focused on joint collaborative efforts like the one that I mentioned on cloud computing, work that we're going to be starting on artificial intelligence. And it's a unique place in which you can bring together industry experts, both at the institution level as well as the associations, to work in partnership with our federal government agencies. Treasury chairs it, but it involves all the federal banking agencies. So it's one of those unique spaces where you can collaborate, you can do things like simulate cyber exercises, you can brainstorm the conceptualization of new initiatives that can be helpful to enhance the resiliency, and drill down deeply into how do we leverage cloud but address some of the gaps that have been identified so that the industry can work more collaboratively with the government.
Got it. And if organizations want to get information, more information on the PHYSIC and some of the artifacts that have been developed, how do they go about getting that information?
Well, the PHYSIC has a website. It's fsscc.org. There's some information on that. And then there's a public sector organization called the Federal Banking Information Infrastructure, or FIBIC, and that's fibic.gov. You can get information on that.
Obviously at IBM Cloud, we've been working with you and the PHYSIC right, for the past year on the cloud initiatives. And I think the three areas that we've identified as opportunities, right, as part of that group. One is around cloud controls, right, having a standardized cloud controls approach and framework. Second being around cloud outsourcing arrangements and some contractual terms and conditions, which obviously can get a little bit more complex from one technology provider to another. And third being secure by default, right? These are the areas that we also hear from our Financial Services Cloud Council that IBM has been running for the past 3.5 years that are top of mind for organizations. So I certainly think the work that the PHYSIC has done, right, with the US Treasury and other agencies is going to help propel some of the technology transformation momentum that is really hinged on cloud transformation. So John, looking at the future, right? So obviously AI has been a hot topic. Quantum is on the horizon as well, right? What should organizations be thinking about on what's next or maybe what's around the corner?
Well, first off, I think organizations, whether you're in a cloud service provider or you're in a financial institution that wants to leverage cloud services, take advantage of the work that we've already done. I mean, I think the paper we did on contracting considerations is a really useful guide in terms of helping financial institutions understand these are the things you want to ask for in your contracts. And we also included references to regulatory expectations, which explains the why. Why do you need this? Because our regulators are expecting this or demanding this. On the cloud service provider, it's a roadmap. It's going to tell you this is what your financial customer base is going to be wanting and looking for, and the reason why, because of the regulatory expectations. So that's step number one. I think the second step is we've now developed this collaboration, which we want to mature and make it more effective. I think the first cut at the work that we did, we engaged the cloud service providers, but probably not as effectively as we could have. And so we want to try to find a way to improve that level of collaboration. I think at the same time, I would anticipate that financial regulators are using the work that's been done and thinking about, do they need to update, supervisory guidance in this space? Do they need to modernize the program that the federal banking agencies have to examine significant service providers? That includes the major cloud service providers. And there's some additional work that has not yet been published around incident response and notification, and also some work on trying to understand the potential for concentration risk, and how do you mitigate that, more importantly. So I think there'll be more work that comes out of that public-private sector collaboration. And then going forward, I think the trajectory is really around artificial intelligence. And how do we leverage AI for good and for benefits that are clearly out there, but also how do we mitigate some of the risks, particularly as it relates to cybersecurity, fraud, deep fakes, the potential for mis and disinformation, things of that nature. And also, the regulators are very concerned about anti-discrimination and compliance with privacy protection and anti-discrimination laws.
Well, John, thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for American Bankers Association and the work they do for the industry, right? And thank you and appreciate your collaboration and partnership.